Hello and welcome. This is where I meet the movers, the shakers, and the opinion makers from all walks of life and just occasionally from beyond. Pictures from Bristol reverberated around the globe last summer as the century-old statue of slave trader Edward Colston was hauled to the ground and dumped in the harbour. Now that event was highly symbolic in the global movement against racism and slavery following the murder of George Floyd under the knee of Minnesota police officer Derek Chauvin a year ago this week. Now that statue of Colston was replaced, albeit for 24 hours, by another of an unlikely South Bristol woman, Jen Reid. So what has changed in that time? I'm delighted to say Jen Reid joins me now. Jen, thanks very much indeed for joining us. I say an unlikely South Bristol woman because you weren't actually even meant to be there that day, were you? That was in essence your first protest.
Hi, Steve, and thank you for bringing me on to Tobacco Factory TV. You're quite right. I was very unlikely, and the reason being is that I am the sole carer of my elderly parents. And so I was very wary of going. My daughter really didn't want me to go. But it was just something that I couldn't ignore, and I felt so compelled to actually go to that protest. And again, like you say, it was my first ever protest, which is how strongly I felt at a black man being murdered at the hands of police. And for me, it was a case of enough is enough. And there have been countless black men and women before him. And I just felt, again, compelled to attend that protest.
How did events then unfold? Because I know that your husband, Al, was involved fundamentally in the statue actually coming down. And then you getting up on that plinth. I mean, all of this stuff must have been, I suppose, pretty spontaneous. But just talk me through the fall of the statue and you ending up standing up there and becoming that figurehead.
Yeah, so like I said, everything was very spontaneous. My husband and I attended the speeches at College Green, and we left the speeches very early in order for us to make a shortcut to Castle Park so we could watch the protesters coming into the park. Again, I was being very COVID aware. We then received a text message from a friend of ours in Brighton who sent us a Twitter feed to let us know that Colston had been toppled. Obviously, rather than going home, my immediate excitement, and I said to my husband, I need to see Colston. I need to see it, see what's going on. So we made our way down. And when I arrived, the crowds were cheering. It was just a very carnival-like atmosphere. Adrenaline was, pumping through everybody's veins. I arrived and I saw Colston on the floor with his face painted red, with a box of jam and juice on his chest and an afro pick on his forehead. I took the opportunity to take several pictures with Colston, obviously ensuring that I never touched Colston at any point in time. I left that to my husband. Well, it's what I know now, leaving it to my husband. And then in split seconds before you knew it, Colston was being rolled to the harbour side. And I remember looking up and then seeing my husband joining in and doing this. And then the proceedings had stopped. And I saw my husband's hand go in the air and pointing. So basically what he was doing was giving instructions to the other protesters to pass him the rope and tying the rope around Colston's neck and at the base, because it was going in a clockwise motion because it was very bottom heavy. And with that, the statue was dragged to the harbour side with my husband there at the forefront. There's many pictures of him circulating. And with that, we got to the harbour side. And I do remember actually asking people to stop because I just thought it was such a poignant, historic moment that it was like, hey, let's stop, let's say something. Anyone, didn't necessarily have to be myself. But with that, it was, no, let's just throw him in the river. And obviously that was met with so many cheers of joy. And again, immediately after that, I just remember being so aware of how historical a moment it was, and saying it to my husband, but he was so full of adrenaline. I don't think he was really taking in what had happened, but obviously being an onlooker and watching what's happening, I knew it was an historic moment. So after that incident, my husband and I obviously decided to go home after that. And obviously that means walking towards and past the plinth. So rather than walking past the plinth, I jumped up onto the plinth. Well, I couldn't get up there initially at first. My husband was like, yes, you can. Again, he was very full of adrenaline and, feeling very righteous in what he had done.
He was making sure you got up there, Jen, not him.
This is exactly it. But, for Al, I think he felt it was my God-given right that I get up there. And he was very determined that I get up there. I then stood on his shoulder and he stood up. He's 6'5". And with that, I landed on my tummy onto the base of the plinth, looking down on the ground. And then I realized that I was scared of heights. So it took me somewhat, although I got up there pretty quickly, it took me some time to actually get to my feet and raise my head and my fist.
Yeah, and those pictures, well, it went into recent history, of course. What you mentioned, what it meant to you to see Colston on the ground and eventually in a state of, I suppose, if a statue can be in a state of humiliation, that's what you saw about Colston. What did that statue mean to you and to people like you, Jen, when you would walk past in the centre of Bristol? To a great many people, I suppose it was just apathy. But what did Colston represent to you that actually cut so deep into your soul?
Well, for me and people of colour, and also as well, you have to remember, the people who are not of colour, they felt the same way as well. And let's not forget that statue was toppled by 4 white people, which, for me is great, because it shows unity, which is really important to me. But for me to see Colston every day lauding it over Bristol, I found it really offensive. And I often thought to myself that Bristol Council should be taken to court for racial hatred. I don't think Colston, it didn't serve any purpose having a transatlantic slave trader preside over the city of Bristol. It was just an affront as far as I'm concerned. Should never have been there. And it also went up 100 years, well, I don't care if it was 5 years or 100 years. It just served no purpose.
Do you think there was an element, because I know from my time here on my radio show since I came about 12 years ago, it was always a topic, it was always in a way a running sore one way or the other, and yet it was just left or pushed into the long grass, or let's discuss it or let's consult about it, and nothing ever happened.
That's it. Nobody ever wanted to deal with it. It was, you can't please all the people all the time, but all the people some of the time, or whatever that saying is. And what has happened is that the city of Bristol took that into their own hands, because everything fell on deaf ears, and obviously the Black Lives Matter protests and the murder of George Floyd, it just brought everything to a head, and people took matters into their own hands. This could have easily have been avoided if all the petitions, people addressed the situation, but nobody wanted to do that. And what I find also really bizarre is that obviously after Colston came down, it was a case of who does the statue belong to? Whose right was it to press charges? Did it belong to the city, or is there Colston's family members who are still alive? Who does it belong to in order for them to press charges? So that adds insult to injury in the fact that nobody wanted to claim Colston. So therefore, why was he there in the first place?
Having said that, you must agree as well that history should not be wiped out, that history should not be cleansed from the curriculum or anything else, but it should be explained. Right. And is that the problem with that statue, that it just wasn't explained enough as to what that man's background was?
I agree that history should not be erased. However, I also believe that the full story should be told. You can't tell one side of history without telling the other. And it's amazing to hear, obviously since the 7th of June and since my statue went up, how many Bristolians, and we're not talking about people of colour, had no idea what Colston, the full story, as far as they're concerned, is Colston's generosity that people know about, but they don't know the other side. So the story, the full history needs to be told. And maybe prior to Colston coming down, the people who are adverse to Colston being toppled would understand and agree. So it just goes to show you when the full history is not being told, how it divides people. I totally agree that Colston should be in a museum and the story explained in its full context, however uncomfortable that might be for people. But that is history, that's the story, and let it be told. Because I think without Colston coming down, I don't think the full story would be told.
And the story does develop, because you mentioned your statue, and I alluded to that at the beginning, that you were up there for what, 24 hours before being removed by the council. Just in brief, just tell us about that Marcus Quinn likeness of you that was created. And in some ways you really did become the figurehead, didn't you, at that time?
I did. Me getting up there on that plinth, I dress as a Black Panther intentionally, because the way I see it is that nothing has changed, nothing significant has changed since then. So we might as well bring the Black Panthers back, hence why I dress like that. I've obviously explained how I got up onto the plinth, and I raised my head and my fist held high, and I raised it for Colston being in the harbour side where he'd thrown so many countless number of slaves into that same water. So as far as I was concerned, I was cleansing that plinth of Colston. I was raising my fist for George Floyd, for my family, for women of colour like me, and for all the injustices that Black people have faced. And I'm getting a tingling feeling now, because it's, I named the statue Surge of Power, because that's exactly how I felt. I felt there was a surge of power, and I felt that the plinth has now been cleansed of Colston.
Do you not think that things have changed relatively dramatically, though, in the last year, that there is so much more awareness of what is going on? Media has changed. There's much, much more awareness of the equality, I think, in the last 12 months than perhaps in decades before that.
Steve, I think you're right in saying, because when people say, what has changed? And I say nothing. However, I think what has changed, I think that people of colour now have a voice. I think that people of colour are now being heard, whether that's in the workplace, whether that's at schools, because of Black Lives Matter. Whereas before, they wouldn't be so outspoken with how they're feeling and not being heard. So in that way, I think progress has been made. However, that is not enough in comparison to past injustices. And we have to move forward together as humans. As humans, we have to, people need to be listened to and understood. So I think it's great in that aspect. Things are changing as far as I'm concerned, and what I'm doing with Cargo Classroom is bringing Black history into schools. We're creating lesson plans that people can access online for free, written by Lawrence Hu through poetry, and telling so many great stories of Black African Jamaican people. I know Marvin Rees is in one of the lesson plans. Cleo Lake is in one of the lesson plans. It's just, I think children have to know the contribution of Black people. It's also to give Black children a sense of pride and a sense of belonging, and to their white counterparts to know what Black people have contributed to society in a celebration.
Is there any danger, do you think, that it could also have another problem of segregating, or of creating anger? I look on Twitter and social media, and some of the stuff that you read would just make you weep, and you think that no progress has been made at all. When we think of maybe Black Lives Matter, is there a difference between maybe the political organization that some people would find it difficult to align with, for example, defunding police or anti-capitalist, and the ethos that the Black Lives Matter stand for, i.e. total equality and people living together and just living as one? I mean, there is a slight difference between the two, isn't there?
For me, with regards to the political side of Black Lives Matter, I am not political in any way, shape or form. Black Lives Matter, yes, they do. But as far as the politics side of it, I am not educated enough in that sense. For me, however, here in the UK, it's not divisive. This is something, you ask the question, is it more divisive or not? Unfortunately, this is what Black people, this is what the path that we've walked forever until Black Lives Matter. So now this is an opportunity for us where we feel comfortable to have conversations, to have very uncomfortable conversations, which is why I think it's also very, very, very important that unity and humanity goes hand in hand with that. I have a mural that's gone up in Bristol, and the saying around that is Bristol rise up, stand tall. Bristol is a city for all. So it's about inclusivity, it's about unity, and it's about humanity.
What have you had to put up with as you grew up? You went to school in Bath, didn't you? And you experienced racism at that time. You had your own way of dealing with it, Jen, but just tell us a bit about what it was like as a young black girl growing up in a very predominantly white area and white region.
Yeah, so I grew up in Bath, predominantly white. The only black girl at my school. I do remember there being an older, since all of this, it's just like, yes, there was another black child at my school. You know, me going to school every day, being brought up in Bath, I fought every day, tooth and nail. I'm very outspoken. I was brought up with boys, and I know how to look after myself. And I've fought most days at school, just for existing, for being black. However, what I wasn't going to do was be silent, which is why I love the Black Lives Matter movement, because it's now giving people a voice. Because I'm very aware that not everybody is like myself and very outspoken, which is why I like the fact, because it's therapeutic to be able to express yourself and to be heard and to know I'm a no nonsense kind of person. If you have these thoughts or you bring your racist behavior to me, I will tell you.
Yeah. And I know your family, I mean, you mentioned at the top your elderly parents, and you're looking after and helping with your dad and your mum. And your dad, Harold, has been very, very influential in your life, Jen, hasn't he? I mean, I can tell that from the conversations we've had before. Tell us a bit about Harold and a little bit about his background and what he's put up with.
Yeah, well, Harold Reid is 87 years old. He's my dad. He's married to my mother, Joyce Eda Reid, who's 85 years old. And my dad, when he first heard of this toppling of the statue, he was very, very worried for myself and for my husband. However, he was also really, really proud of both of us. You know, my dad is very much into unity. Everybody, we're all humans. We all bleed red. People need to stand together. You know, it's not been an easy path for him. He left Jamaica at 19 years old and came to the UK and thought houses were on fire when he saw smoke coming out of the chimney. He was also separated from my mum for 18 months while he made his way here and saved enough money in order to send for her from Jamaica with my elder sister. So it's something that, you know, to come to a country where you have been invited and, you know, and have been promised that you will be welcomed, to actually get here and only to find, number one, it's cold, and number two, people are not accepting of you.
And of course, Harold would have been living through the times of the Bristol bus boycott and Paul Stevenson and the massive, almost world-changing events that were happening through that time.
That's right. And, you know, and if you look from then to now, we're having the same conversation. The same conversation is being had after so many years, which is why the question, what's changed? Well, really, actually not a lot, because we're still having the same conversation. And this is what I want to change. And, you know, I want to do what I can in order to contribute to change, visiting schools, talking to students, etc., and working really closely with the Cargo Classroom to bring about that change. I don't think it's something that the government are on board with yet, if they ever will. However, what I want to do along with Cargo Classroom is bring that change ourselves. I think it's a thing that you have to take matters into your own hand, and doing that in a unified with humans, black, white, red, pink or blue.
One other thing that came out, I suppose, of last year, and you getting up on that plinth, because it's changed your life. I'll ask you about that in just a second or two. But something else that's come out of all that is Descendants, isn't it? Which is a Radio 4 documentary which features yourself, which actually comes out this very week at the time of recording now. Perhaps people will maybe listen to it on iPlayer or whatever. But that actually uncovered for you elements of your background and your heritage and enslavement which opened your eyes, Jen, as well. There was rape, there was all sorts of things going on back there. Just briefly give us an idea of what that's uncovered.
Wow, yeah, I'm just taking all that in, and you're quite right in what you're saying. So I've taken part in a BBC4 programme called Generations that airs on Friday evening on Radio 4. I have always tried to look at my ancestry, prior to the protests, etc. It's something I always kind of dabble in, and looking at my family history. And I get, my dad's like an elephant. He remembers things from, I'm sure he's probably about 2. It's something I've always dabbled with. However, when I was approached by the BBC to take part in this programme, what they have uncovered is incredible. It's also something that makes me very, very angry. What they have discovered is my grandmother, 5 times removed, who was the first slave to be taken from Africa to the Caribbean. And 3 generations of my ancestors, women, were kept together. The third grandmother removed was clearly, obviously, raped because her child is registered as mulatto. And my 5th grandmother removed, her daughter was Creole. So when the child is Creole, it means that there were 2 Black people, consensual. And if it was mulatto, obviously, back then, that obviously is via rape. So that is something that, we talk about slavery and read it, but when it's actually really personal to you, it really does something to you. It really does something to your heart. They've told me what my grandmother's name was, which I refused to call her Alice, because her name clearly was not Alice. I'm currently looking for a name of meaning, and I need to do a DNA test to find out my blood lineage and what part of Africa my descendants are from, and to rename her so I can remember her with her African name.
It's incredible stuff. It really is. A couple of quick questions. I say quick because there's never quick answers to these. But Bristol is a fabulous city. It's a very diverse city, and I would like to think it's a very tolerant city. In your eyes, is it a tolerant city? In your eyes, is it a city of sanctuary that it claims to be?
There's a kind of really dirty underbelly to all of that. On the outside, it's all lovely and shiny, but there is an undercurrent. If you look at Bristol Post, there's LBC, there's, the really disgusting and derogatory and nasty things in the comments from people. But, these are people who sit on their keyboard and make all of these remarks. But what's worrying is that could be the same person who is working with a person of colour at their workplace. And it has to change. How you get these people on board, I have no idea. You are quite welcome to come on board. I will hug you. I will make you see change, because we cannot continue this divide and this hatred. We have to come together to make the world a better place for everybody.
Just a final question to you now, Jen Reid. We've talked about other people, we've talked about communities and so on, and we've talked about Bristol as a whole and the country. Has your life changed in the last year since you stood on that page? What way has your life changed over those 12 months?
Oh, well, it's changed dramatically. I have a platform. Obviously, this is not something that I planned. I've kind of been thrown into this role, which I will, take with both hands. But it has been very life-changing. I'm currently speaking to publishers regarding a children's book. I go into schools and I create lesson plans for children, again, with regards to unity, diversity, etc. And to bring children together, because as far as I'm concerned, as Whitney said, children are the future. And I really do believe in this generation, that they are the change. I ask them to look at everything, even statues in themselves. Who is that statue? What do they represent? Is it inclusive? So yeah, my life has changed dramatically. There's been so many great things going on.
Listen, it's been a delight to talk to you, and I'm delighted that you came on Tobacco Factory Television.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Oh, Steve, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, huge thanks to Jen Reid for talking to me so openly and emotionally on Tobacco Factory Television. We'll have another top interview coming up for you very, very soon, so keep an eye out for that. And if you do like what you see, please press that subscribe button. I'll see you before too long. Until then, bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.